you so much for the warm introduction. Um, yes, really looking forward for the opportunity of going back to experiment together. And yeah, today I wanted to talk a little bit about for us the relationship that um, cybernetics has to the development of artificial intelligence and a lot of the biofeedback work that we are doing at this point. So I just really wanted to start with a little like a conceptual introduction, an historical introduction in a way, just to follow to show the path that we were following during these years. So I am pretty sure that everyone is connected to the concept, but yeah, so cybernetics as the definition for us, the definition from Norbert Weiner, and he defines it first as the science of control and communication in the animal and the machine. So here, this first concept introducing control in both systems, the mechanical and the living system, is a pivotal point for us, really important uh, aspect on the way we manage to develop our work. So one definition that we like is that cybernetics as a way for machines, electronical machines, mechanical, neural, or economical, is the same, has the same relation as geometry for the real object in a terrestrial space. So geometry defines the rules that objects develop, the way they relate, behave, and also evolve in a three-dimensional space. And cybernetics is a way for machines and neural networks and, for example, economical systems to behave on a systemical basis. So the three cores of cybernetics, the first one is control, the purpose of the machines and living. Then the second is the feedback, which is really important for a lot of media, contemporary media artists, and also for the development of contemporary technology and a lot of processing science. Feedback describes this ability of a mechanism to use sensors to receive information and about the actual performance as opposed as the expected performance of a system, which is really interesting because in general, the traditional development of systems are related to this idea of controlling, developing a series of steps for a system to follow. But then there is the emergence of real behavior. And in this second core, they already imagine that or realize that there is always a bug or some sort of ghost in the system that creates their own behavior. Feedback will provide a kinesthetic sense to machines, akin to the human awareness of the position and movement of the arms and legs. This analogy led Weimar to another core idea, which is the relationship between humans and machine. So some of the influential developers in this sense that from my point of view, part of being scientists, they were like in some way some of the first media electronic artists. Ashby, one of those, was developing this idea to sort of explore the way that the world affects the organism and the organism affect the world around it. So for Ashby, a way to explain how organisms achieve homeostasis and the animals and plants maintain some sort of balance in life developed this machine, which is called the homeostat, and is one of these first sort of like electroneural systems that in very small amount of components they were sort of reproducing complex organic behaviors. Another of these concepts is this question: what's the organization of the living? What takes place in the phenomena of perception? And these questions brought the concepts of autopoiesis, autopoiesis as a self-generative, self-maintaining structure in the living systems. So the autopoiesis concept was developed by Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela, two Chilean microbiologists, researchers, who actually enable us to have a description of the system of living instead of just have a list of elements that describe the living as it was before the development of this concept. So this idea has a big impact because life was not longer bound to evolution. They created the cybernetic organism, a kind of organism that was able to evolve over time on a synthetic environment, on a virtual, on a digital and electronic environment. And this was a very strong moment, both for the science fiction development as well for the scientific research. And then the idea of the electric brain, which was a very important concept for Walter Gray's development. And the brain as a research apparatus, it has a very long history already. In the 1875, Canton was able to develop the encephalogram. By 1920, Hans Berger sort of broken the field. And decades later, they started to developing the analysis of different kinds of disorder just by the observation of those electrical signals. So how might one study the brain was like the actual question that Walter developed. And one of his very strong concepts and developments was actually the expectancy way. So the analysis of a chipstein electrical potential of the brain as a way of predict the performance of intentional actions. So basically, this moment when you want to move your arm, but first you think of sending the message to your arm to be moved, and then they will manage to record this pre-intentional brainwave action. And because of these ideas, Walter also started to develop in these very also interesting devices, the tortoises. And the tortoises, they have interesting history because it's a very unique way to study the brain. Instead of, trying to understand a full complex system, Walter tried to reproduce the idea of neurons. Simple neurons, they have some way of communicating in between them. But in this case, it was simpler than that. It was just a motorized system with some distance sensors. And the sensor was actually a light diode sensor. So it was not even distance. It was, shades of gray in a way. And just with those elements over time, Walter started to recognize some sort of like behaviors emerging in between the tortoises. They were reacting as if they have some sort of communication process. And those ideas open the investigation in a more complex way of the brain as a scanning mechanism. So the concepts are basically that we are also continuously scanning our environment and trying to reproduce or understand the patterns that are emerging in front of this sensorial um, apparatus, which is our vision and the brain, and also, you know, touch and all the different configurations. I'm going to talk broader about those sensory systems on the second part of this presentation. But yeah, first, to explore these ideas. So all these developments, they have a very big impact on the cultural development, and some of those ideas, they were also inspired the beginnings of what we called biomusic. And let's check some of those early concepts. And of course, there is always the reference of Alvin Lucier and his famous piece Music for Solo Performer on 65. So in this case, it's very interesting because Lucier was not actually analyzing EEG signals, but instead he was using the signals as some sort of like a switch to amplify uh, very basic electrode readings and use those into physical instruments. So it was an analog translation, a transduction of the electrical signal vibrating in a speaker, and then this vibration translated into a physical um, reaction. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of this, maybe because it's a very long entrance. So there is a whole process of preparation as part of the performance. And I find it quite interesting because also researcher Andrew Pickering was saying that science is a performance itself. So every time we reproduce an experiment, we are performing. And in this case, Lucier is taking this concept completely by presenting the whole preparation and the whole process as part of the performance. Something really interesting is also that Lucier is using an artifact to activate the system. In today's, we know that closing our eyes is just an artifact in the brainwave reading, but in the case of music for solo performance was absolutely uh, like a principal element for the process. A very simple setup, a little band, the amplifier, and then you have a configuration of two drums. I don't know if you're listening. Actually, I think I have to reshare because probably I forgot to share sound. So just 1 second. Yes. Sorry. Now you're gonna hear. There is the very old recording, so the audio is not like the best, but you can get an idea of the process. Sorry. So in general, the performance is this continues to try to get into a beta state, which is the more readable part of it, and send the vibration to the two drums and amplify them so the acoustical wave is physically imprinted in the system. Then we have Richard Teitelbaum. I don't know if it's super complicated for me to pronounce his last name. Mm, so Teitelbaum was a friend from Robert Mox, and they start talking about this idea about organ music that he wanted to perform by using alpha waves. And alpha waves are in between 8 and 12 hertz. So Moog have the idea to create an amplifier and send the amplified signals to a voltage control Moog oscillator. And he actually made a high gain differential amplifier for Teltenbaum for him to perform the piece. And here we can see that the system was using a contact heart with a microphone and also a microphone that goes onto the throat. Then he has a mix and a preamplification of those signals and a distribution of the signals. And also he had a differential amplifier with the EEG readings over here. So let's play a little bit of the piece. Um, Also, this piece is presented with the Música Electrónica Viva, the MEP, who is a band created by Tatenbaum, where also Alan Bryant and Alvin Curan were part of this group in the 66. And so the piece starts evolving. In part by the excitation of the performers, their heartbeat increased, the signals also increase over time, and the performative aspect with the voices and everything became a little bit more chaotic, and they start mixing new elements from the synthesizer to be heard during, a sort of climax, and yeah, creating this very visceral, physical piece. I find it really interesting because it's also, like a very linear transduction of an electrical, bioelectrical signal into a electrical instrument and through sound. Then, of course, Manford L. Eaton created this book, the Biomusic book, where he proposes a series of recipes to create electronical compositions using these cyclical signals from the human body mainly. So he has some sort of like maps for those, like this one, sensory and electronic stimulation and inhibition devices. This is not just about reading, but he also introduces the idea of stimulating the subjects, creating the feedback by reading the reaction and then putting those back into sound again. So here the feedback element becomes more uh, important on the creation process. Then Rosenboom also created a series of pieces by using those elements, a lot of ECG readings from the heart, muscular readings, brainwave readings, and also having the elements of feedback as part of the process. So yes, Russell was a professor at Arts. Amazing, amazing. Marcel, that's a great opportunity to have such a great composer as part of your class teachers. So this piece is beautiful in you know acoustical aspects, and also the instruments, in the way he introduces these instruments. It's also completely analogical, but it's also getting into the aesthetics of the digital in the way that it's creating the sound. Because, of course, at this point, he has much more control over the signals that he's reading and different ways of organizing those readings. And as part of this process, he introduces software to analyze the organization of the brainwaves. So even though the acoustic components are not digital, the processing of the signals are digital, and that gives a whole new spectrum for the creation of bio compositions. I'm gonna jump a little bit. And also the aesthetics of this piece are really more ambient in the way that is structuring the piece.
The material of music is sound and silence.
John Cage.
Integrating these is composing. I have nothing to say, and I am saying it.
So in this case, Cage creates this piece performed by Tudor, where we're not seeing any, brain readers, EEG readings, or any sort of sensors, but the piece is composed in a way there is a experience in between the listener and the expectancy of what is going to be played during that time, and the possible reactions that those um, the public is going to have during the process of this piece. So they were looking for a high state of consciousness where silence becomes the element of presence in the space. And in that sense, the piece is it's um, a biofeedback. It's, even though it's not a piece that actually uses electronical components for the purpose of the creation of the piece. So those were the early days, and then of course there is a whole um, new wave in the 80s to the 2000s, uh, where the use of software and digital instruments became more um, apparent. They start to use pattern recognition software, feature extraction softwares, and all kinds of algorithmic combinations in order to have more complex correlation with those signals and the capacities of composition. So the brain-computer interfaces system um were born in that moment. So here is a little map from the the first human EEG reading to the actual to 2015, where the first brain computer interface journal was issued, and the International Society of Brain Computer Interfaces were founded. That's why I choose those periods of time, because from there on, it's a new history. Actually, the last 20 years of human research are being, I think, it's recorded as the most interesting, and where we actually find more information and learn more about the life of the brain and his complexity. So in 1990s, Benjamin Knapp created the biomuse system, a very important professor also of many of the contemporary composers. So he's performing his modular biosignal sensors with EMC, EMG, EEG, and A motion and heart rate detection. I love that you can hear actually, the response of the muscle contraction, but there is also in the background a continuous beat. I'm gonna play it again so you can sort of detect that. Something like that is just the transmission rate of the microcontroller. That is also part of the performance, but I find it really interesting because it's 1990, and of course it's one of the first systems of this nature. But in today's world, we try to avoid, that the controller is present in any ways in the sound creation or visual creation. But I find it interesting that he decides to keep it there. So there is also some other experiments with brainwaves. This is a performance by Horsbren and Werner C. on Transmediale in 1994 performance, where they were sort of translating brainwaves into cymatic responses in a fake when in a pool they created for that purpose. I just find these images. I read some memories about the performance, but it was really interesting to me that they have all this set up sort of underground laboratory with a huge pool and the cymatic with the speakers in the need of this pool to create the cymatics. Then Atao Tanaka, a student from NAP, creator of the myogram, and I don't know, one of the best performers uh, on the use of bioelectrical muscular readings. You're gonna jump because it has different parts. So this is one is called the sculpting the sound of a growling wolf. And then he has a tamarind on 3 frequencies. The sonification of the bioelectrical nerve impulse. Very literal, but also quite effective. And of course, you have a Tao as a director of the program of digital music in Goldsmiths and as developer, but he's also introducing more the idea of a wearable in a more complete sense, a device that is capable to communicate by Wi-Fi network and deliver all the data in a very precise and also well-designed package, and also a combination of softwares for the analysis and making more accessible for composers, just to grab these devices and start developing music that makes sense by the use of these technologies. In the 2000s, Tyrell and Mueller, they created this BIOS, a computer system that has a series of full sets of algorithms in Linux where you can actually, you know, do some Fourier transformations and all kinds of analysis with a pre-built system. And this was like a first version of something that is called today the OpenBCI system. It's not related, but it's the same package of concepts, like having a DIY development framework for artists to access and explore these concepts. This is one of the first, I think is one of the unique exercises, unique in that sense, where several participants are read on their EEG signals. And it was in 2003 by James Fong. I'm gonna jump a little bit.
These contraptions everywhere, but
you come in and you haven't got a clue what to expect, and you see these things hanging from the ceiling, and you're kind of like, what are they going to do to me, right?
What happens when you have a community of cyborgs? When you have a community that shares a collective experience, then something interesting happens.
But before anything at all can happen, the audience has to get wired for sound. First,
the system is very
similar
to the kind of headset used by Lucia.
These percussionists are hooked up to ECG, or electrocardiogram sensors. Their heartbeats will become drum beats. Now everyone's hooked up, it's time to learn how to play in the waves.
One of the responses that we're looking for is sort of agitation. Now you see these sort of electricity kind of flashing by on the screen. I sort of like to think of this as sort of the staves of music, but instead of notes passing by, notes now are sort of your EEG, and we're sort of forming this orchestra. You'll notice some of them sort of flash red. So when it's red, it means you're a little bit agitated, so we're probably getting some muscular response. So if you sort of clench your teeth, or sort of grimace, there you go. So we get a lot more red signals.
Fong's program will screen out the agitated red signals. It will take only the calm white signals and make music of them.
This is sort of a
Yeah, well, more,
Not
like a
everyone is
minimal sort of electronic music, but also interesting in the sense that what happens with when many people is analyzed at the same time, and what happened with a collective biofeedback. It's not just one person. It's like trying to make sense of several readings at the same time. Then also more recent versions, Lisa Park using the the cymatic again, but with a more I don't know, sculptural installation, more clean. Also, I think inspired on the Asian culture. Marco Donnarumma, student of Atau, Tanaka, an Italian composer that introduces a more theatrical use of these devices, muscular reaction. And this is one of the 2016 pieces. I think he was when he was starting to work with this device. Well, he's also sort of introducing some elements from more like noise music in a very conscious way, like exploding the ability of the noise into the performance part. And Goiben Ari, which develops this um, artificial brain, microbrain, out of his own cells, and then created this whole modular to perform the bioelectrical activity of this brain together with live musicians. It's a little bit of the process of the cell F.
Self is the world's first neural synthesizer. It is an autonomous instrument that is composed of a brain made of biological neural networks and a body made of analog modular synthesizers that work in synergy. The neural networks are bioengineered from the project's initiator Guy Benari's cells. There is no programming or computers involved, only biological matter and analog circuits. A wetalog instrument. With Self, the musician and musical instrument become one entity to create a cybernetic musician, a rock star in a petri dish.
That's really funny.
Self premiered in a live set with Tokyo based drummer Darren Moore. The sound of the drums was fed as electric stimulations into Self's neural network, and Self responded by controlling the synthesizers in an improvised post-human sound piece. Of research, explorative effort in
Well, there is a whole explanation of the process, but basically, it's the reaction of this brain cell responding to the signals, and the little noise on the back was actually the system sound. And yes, just as documental information, this listening to the mind, listening series of performance, which is quite interesting to analyze because it's a whole series of pieces created on the concept of the data sonification, data from the brain, and the process of biofeedback to hear what were the reactions organized by the ICA. And there is like a really interesting group of artworks, the neural dialogues, uh, what are you really thinking, and all of them are sort of approximation to try to sonify the brain in a proper or interesting way. And this was the configuration in the space. So you can do multi-channel artwork for this series. And here is the system. All of them use the same data sets from the same EEG cap with the same behavior. So this is what they were using on that time. And yeah, some fundamentals. The first waves, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. They were like a focus for these studies, but today we have also, gamma waves and other kinds of like correlation signalings and entrainment and other forms to analyze waves, not just as pure signals. So I'm gonna stop the presentation here just to have a little to change to the other presentation. And I don't know if you have you want to have or have any questions until this point, and before I start the second part.
I think we go on for the second part.
Okay.
To see what you have been up to.
Excellent. Just a second. Let me.
This is a really nice overview, by the way. It's always good to revisit this works.
Yeah, just to have the same context. Okay, let me share again. So let me share. So I'm just going to start with this process, which is part of an artwork that we are developing at this point, a series of artworks that are related to the use of emotional modulators or emotional triggers on the correlation of brainwave activity. So this is like the system that we are using at this point. So we have a series of electrodes. Uh, uh, then we sort of analyze the signals into ECAT configurations. And from there, we organize those signals into arousal balance, which is a model created by neurologists to find three-dimensional position of the brain waves that relate to emotions, specifically this arrangement, high arousal, low arousal, negative and positive balance. And yes, you have like angry, nervous, sad, bored, sleepy, calm, peaceful, relaxed, excited. I think there is also love and other kinds of emotions. So the idea is to use the configurations. We use the energy positions to start an attractor system to draw the behavior of the brain waves in this way. And here's an example of a very basic system where you have the emotional positions, the electrodes, and the attractors of those emotions over time. Then we develop more complex configurations. And the final version of this system is actually this map. We decided to create an abstraction of the motions. We don't put it as they are, as a a readable name, because this is a portrait of a person. So our idea is to create something we call the deep self portraits, and it's a way to present a tour in the memory of a person. So we ask our subjects to spend 10 minutes in a chair, in a special chair, thinking about a memory they want to recall. And so this is the time reading. And then we start analyzing the emotional pointers during that time. And we create a map out of those moments and a tree representation of the three most important emotions over that period of time. So this is actually, I don't know, it's repeated. And with those data, we are also able, this not only represents that, but it's also a graphical a score that we are using to create music representations of those travels. It can be also be used as a real-time device. So it gives feedback to the people that is, doing the brain memory tour. And this is the deep self sequencer, the motion stream system, where we record each of those steps over time per channel, and then have a pre-analysis of the values. So we can also use, for example, Max MSP, which is one of our favorite uh, electronic composition tools, and Touch Designer to create an actual performance out of this pre-record data. So I'm gonna show you a video of one of these outputs. this was actually a live performance on the Fulcrum residency. And the idea here is that we are not using the headset in real time. We can do that for the performance also, but mainly we are focusing on the use of the data sets recorded from several people, so we can have a more complex composition. And also, something that is really important is that we are not approaching this as a sonification process. We are approaching this as a data-driven composition, which means that we create an aesthetical environment that is fed with the data and influenced by the data, but is not completely controlled by the data. So in that sense, we are also uh, using the second principle, the third principle of cybernetics, which is influence. We are influencing our system with the use of data. Let me check, there is actually sharing the sound again. Yes. Okay, you're seeing the screen?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm gonna jump so you can listen to other of the parts and also to show you the So in this piece, we are exploring the idea of the data set also as an instrument. And we have, of course, a series of algorithms that I'm going to show you to organize the different states of the emotional states we're finding during the analysis of the data. And at the same time, we're also doing this conscious organization of the sound piece. In this case, this piece is also referring in aesthetical terms to the Mexican composer Jorge Reyes, which was one of the first composers in Mexico to introduce the use of neo-indigenism, the use of aesthetical musical elements from indigenous Mexican culture into the creation of ambient drone music. And Reyes have a whole theory of the influence of music in the emotional states. And for us was very important to be capable to actually create the tools necessary to prove that music is actually creating emotional state on the listener. And at the same time using the response of the listener as part of the creation process. So our organization of projects is always very much focused on the archive of the knowledge we are sort of creating or developing during the process. And here you can find our repository and some of the elements we are using for the analysis and the creation of the data sets, and also the instruments we designed to perform the data. So in this case is the score and the sequencer and the different setups of tools that we have for that purpose. And at this point, we are also developing new elements, new instruments. They're going to be part of the process. So we are working on a series of headsets that are going to be used as instruments also to present, to experience brain waves in a real-time wave. Let me show you. So this is just a presentation of the process that we are working at this point. In this case, we are working on a entrainment system. This one is with heartbeats. And as you can see, we are using instruments. These are called the ocean drums. So we are using ocean drums from the Tarahumara culture in the north of Mexico that are being controlled by the parameters of entrainment in heartbeats, and then performed by a series of solenoid electromagnetic motors on this arrangement of 5 motors. And the idea is a performative piece. So we're going to have this arrangement where you can see several performers entering into the state of entrainment. So basically, the state of entrainment is when 2 hearts or more start beating at the same rhythm. So the experience is that we start with the differential rhythms because every heartbeat is going to be on different states. Of course, as performer, you can expect people to be nervous, so probably it's going to be a little bit of tachycardia, like fast beating. Then we have to do a series of respiration exercises, and then we focus on the sound of the other hearts for a period of time until we get synchronized. In this case, the heart is represented, the beat is represented by the drums. It's not the actual amplification of the heartbeat. But the beautiful thing of this the instrument is actually very close to a heart sound. And we also have another process, the wave reflector. And the wave reflector, it's around the use of EEG data. And instead of using a sonification process of using speakers, we're building ceramical oscillators. Ceramics have a very interesting oscillatory behavior. That's why they're also is very popular in the use of electronics. So we're in this case we're using a series of, let me go there to show you. A series of vibration sensors, the coin ones. Just a second. So this is the physical system, is a sound sculpture, and this is the model also, using the 16 electrode open BCI arrangement. Then using an algorithm for distributed source location. In this case, what we want is to have people to be capable to have the experience of the motion of the brain waves as they're happening in the brain in real time. It's a very simple but useful concept, because when we think about brain waves, we don't think that they're actually reflecting in projecting themselves inside the brain. We think it's a continuous sort of signal, and it's actually really interesting the way that some readings start in one position on the brain, and then they start evolving and moving into another point and direction, and then going back into the front and so on. So the idea of this piece is simply to have accessible experience of those motions. And of course, we're using machine learning to sort of predict the movement and analyze the distribution and precision, and these coin motors to oscillate and modify the the ceramics. And yeah, this is the status of the Deep Self project and the research we are doing. For us, it's a process that is been active since 2014. That's when we started exploring the brainwave as a source of interaction and compositional process. And I want to show you also a series of works that are related more to neural networks. And also, well, neural networks are inspired by the brain. So just a second. Patient first. Get lost when I don't have two screens. It's like where is the here? So the way that we approach the design of our sound is also related to these biological processes. I forgot to introduce the team. So Paloma Lopez, it's the co-creator of the collective with myself, and then we have a very beautiful network of friends from different parts of the world: Chile, Mexico, Barcelona. And over 10 years, we evolved to this little family. At the beginning, it was only the two of us doing these crazy processes, but now we have a full family. So just to create the context inside the work of interspecifics. So for us, one of the main processes, it's about understanding awareness as a whole. And in order to do that, we have to create several questions that are connected to the way we perceive reality. And science is one of the main tools to explore those processes. So our work, it's a combination of different areas of creativity. We find that science is a way of creativity, engineering is also design, art, of course, but they are not separated in between them. In this sense, it's a transmedia experience because we need all of these different areas in order to find tools, methodologies, and also uh, ideas to develop our process. So this is one of the networks I was showing to you. So for us, the process starts, or network starts first with the microbial networks. Then there is also the neural networks. But for us, the mimicking of those networks into algorithms is what we understand as the creation of sound, neural sound in human terms. Here is our brain, first brain reader. And this neural network serves as the fundamental framework for a creativity form that is characterized by the complexity and instability of living within an expressive composition of events. So the interesting aspect of the creation of neural networks is that they were created trying to mimic the behavior of something so complex as the brain, something that we cannot say that we understand completely. This is still a work in progress. But at the end, it's about how we learn. The main question of intelligence is how we manage to acquire the experience and develop awareness out of those experiences. So the network itself is defined as a performative entity, possibly an environment in continuous transmutation. So we like to explore this idea of the network as a space where dreams and hallucinations are capable of emerging in some point. And this is also where we connect or practice as Latin American artists, because we believe that it's really important to retake some ideas of animism in a space that is so complex and also impossible to distinguish from this space of magic of emergence as these networks. So we ask ourselves, is the spectral a quality, a possibility for matter to dream, or is the symptom of the hallucination of matter? And spectrality in this sense is not just about, the idea of the phantasmagoric emergence, but also a spectrality in sound, a spectrality in terms of visualization. Spectrality is like a compression of a lot of elements that just became tangible without a precise form. And this is something also that Lucier was exploring a lot on his work. For example, on the piece I Am Sitting in a Room, he showed us a way to get from a you know a word spoken space and over the repetition becoming a noise and spectrality. And that's something that we try to reproduce in our artwork. So we design an experiment using artificial intelligence and neural networks to reproduce the concepts of Lucier in this piece. Here is the video. This piece is called Recurring Morpheme Radio. And the concept is to train a series of neural networks with the most listened music in streaming platforms. So by doing this, we can actually, I'm gonna let this loading while I explain. We can actually reproduce the basic concept of I am sitting in a room, which is repetition in a space. But instead of having a physical space, we have a latent space, the latent space of the neural network. And it was really interesting because at the beginning, like the first trainings of those songs, let's say, Bad Bunny and all these musicians that are like top play on the streaming platforms. So we managed to get, Bad Bunny music like reggaeton and, those kinds of uh, genres of music. But over time, over the repetition, the spectrality start appearing in the exercise. And that's when things got really interesting because we sort of find that repetition in terms of cultural practices could be something dangerous, of course, but at the same time it takes you into the pure properties of that sound. Let me check what's going on with the. I'm gonna try to play it from here. Yeah, I can pop the link to the chat. Just a second. Thanks for the idea. So you can. Sorry, it seems that my network is having some sort of trouble at this point because everything is loading very slow. Okay, here is the link.
Leslie, how much material do you still have? Just to understand, because we are now 1 hour and 20 minutes almost.
Yeah. I'm about to close with this. I was about to close the session and just opening for questions.
Okay, perfect. So did you put it in the chat?
Yes, I'm putting it now. So you can check some of the over there. Yeah, it's a long piece. So I was just about, to show you some of the elements of the video. Let me see if I can do it from here. Yes, here is loading. So let me share my screen. sharing so I can actually explain. So in this version, we used the created sounds that our system created over a period of a year or something. So those sounds were transmitted on a radio station that was transmitting continuously 24/7 with algorithm that selected the different tracks and presented as a radio uh, station. And then we decide to use those and create a performance piece where we present the behavior of the network. Is this what you can see over here? The elements that are composing a specific piece over a point of time. So we have, for example, techno, experimental, punk, electronic, and every track has a title that was also created by a neural network. So in this case, the idea was to produce like something similar to a manifesto of the elements, and you can read this manifesto during the performance of the piece.
Are you planning to do anything with this during your Los Angeles? What is your Los Angeles trip going to be about?
Los Angeles trips is about, we are testing, so we are doing the exhibition with the lace for Beatriz da Costa artwork, and we are rebuilding the pigeon block. So we're gonna do some test of this device that Beatriz designed to, measure air pollution.
Yes, the pigeon block, yes.
Exactly. So I'm very excited about this because we rebuild the whole system with new technology, but based on Beatriz's uh, um, design directions, and we do this did this media archaeology work to bring the device alive again. So basically, it's going to be focused on that, but of course, I'm going to try to present some performances during my 2 weeks over there.
Okay. Well, we'll keep us informed, and we'll try to visit and see. This sounds very, very exciting.
Sure. And yeah, I think I can close the session over here. Of course, there is always like a lot of processes going on. We're right now presenting a second stage of the Codex Virtualis. I just gonna leave a video over here so you can check that later. And that's our exercise on creation of artificial life following Lynn Margulies' ideas on symbiogenesis and cooperation. So I'm just gonna leave a video so you can check that out later. There is a PDF on the process of that also, so you can give it a little try. Okay, over there.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I was wondering where. So there's another Vimeo link. All right. Well, Leslie, thank you so much. And we'll open it up for, I think we have time for one or two questions.
Yeah.
But in any case, we will try to also really connect with you when you come to Southern California. So, yes, questions. There's 14 people left
Okay.
because we went quite long, but hopefully we can get some questions. Really, no questions.
It's okay. It was a long session.
Well, I think that it's for me. Gustavo, go ahead.
No. I had a question. Thank you,
There's
Leslie.
a question actually. There's actually also a question in the chat.
Yeah, well, actually, that's very similar to my question, but I wanted to ask specifically, when you start looking at the mappings and the different domains, you talked about the idea of space. But there's, I think, different types of spaces, the spaces of data, there's your intellectual space, and then your performative space. How do you as a group collaborate and really come up with the totality of the performances, not from conceptual all the way to how you deliver it? Like how do
Yeah.
you philosophically see that as an artist?
Yeah. I think in general, we're very much behave as a sort of swarm. So this kind of swarm intelligence is something that we try to follow. So sometimes somebody comes with a concept, an idea, and puts it on the table, and then we try to understand this idea from the different points of view that everybody has, and put those together, and we start prototyping from there. So there is not like a fixed way to develop something. There is more a research process. So in that sense, we really believe in this concept of artistic research. That is something that we expand every time we develop a new project. So, for example, for mapping parameters into, from brain waves to composition, or bioelectrical bacterial data into visuals, all depends on the nature of the phenomena that we are exploring. And we sort of follow, the state of the art of that technology in that precise time. And we immerse ourselves into researching those processes to have a better understanding and develop a way that makes sense for that phenomenon in particular.
That sounds great. And then I also had another follow-up. When you think about the idea of sound, it seems that you were talking about a few different things within cybernetics, the theory, but then but there's a performative aspect to it. And when you were here at MAT doing your workshop, I remember you were sharing a few things with software and the performative aspect. How does your group, or I would say your artistic conceptual persona, change during the performance? And how do you see the instrument and you coming together to make this experience?
Yeah, I think when you're performing, there is more like a more metaphysical aspect in that sense, because you are becoming the other in the phenomena, the the space, and you have to, in sort of way, like empty yourself and let the thing that you're going to perform to take over. This is also part of these animistic ideas that we're trying to explore as part of our practice. So the interface give us access to that. That's why we develop the technology. The technology is the interface, the bridge that is going to make the connection. And then the sound is the actual presence. And that's where the connections became in between, phenomenon, performer, audience. Sound involves everyone to that space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Leslie, for the wonderful, comprehensive presentation. And I look forward to seeing you in a presentation and your performance, because I think it'll change also when you're there. So when you come into town, it would be great just to see. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Gustavo.
And I have a kind of a process question connected to your. I said I have a process question connected to your first part of your lecture, which was this historical overview, and essentially, how did you? So what was the trigger point when you started looking back into history? Because I think that happened, right? It was not like history was there and you kind of grew out of it, but it's like with a lot of us, we kind of discovered our past by repeating it and then suddenly realizing, oh my God, there's all of this great research work that was done, 50, 60 years ago that nobody ever told us about. And we were able to find out about these processes and projects and so on. So I'm just curious about how did you kind of enter this? Because I have a very similar take on it. I really think that there are these formative practices, research practices that we are referring to, and that we must know them to be able to construct the future in a way, right? You cannot not reference works that are extremely fundamental for the development of the field. And I think that you are definitely doing this. So I'm just curious, what was the pivot point for you in that regard?
Yeah. It's funny because it was actually a political aspect. As I grew up in the Tijuana border, and during the late 90s, it was a lot of like left lecture groups, and I discovered like Kropotsky's work, and I don't know, from there I start sort of like reading the relationship in between social development and technology. It became really, evident that they are totally connected and intertwined. And I sort of got this like a personal mission that it was a lot of research that was super interesting in theory, but that they didn't have the proper tools to develop the experiments. And I find that I can do it by making art processes and approaching those ideas from contemporary technology and contemporary practices. So it's always been a part of my practice to do this sort of historical research. Like I don't know, when I was working with the plants, it was because of Cliff Baxter development, and then Cliff Baxter took me back in time to Bosé, and then I find out, it's been forever that people is trying to understand the sensorial behavior of plants. It's not something of today's world. And then I arrive into cybernetics because I was looking for the sort of origins of lives in material aspects in chemistry, and that was Plask work. And then it was like, okay, so Plask was working with this, and then Walter was working with the brain. So it's like a path. It was already created, and I was just following, trying to reconnect the dots of those people and put it together and make it sense in my own practice and research.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, this all makes sense. Very, very exciting to see this. And now, it's recorded, so we can always kind of reference back and discuss. But as Gustavo said, I'm really looking forward to reconnecting also in person very soon. So, yeah. Thanks, everybody, for hanging in here. And thank you, Leslie. You are still in Amsterdam?
Right now in Geneva, we have tomorrow.
Geneva.
Yeah, the Biennale of Image in Motion over here. So it's just going to be a lot of AI and exciting work.
Great. And then we'll see you on the other side very soon. Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for showing up. I think next week, we have also next week, Leslie, if you have time, I'll send you we'll put you on our list. We have a very interesting, actually, lecture connected with the history of what you were talking about today. We have a researcher who is going to talk about Kepes. Martin Oros.
You need to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, you need to run too. Okay.
Yeah, I need to run. Sorry.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.
Take
Bye.
care.